So many talented artists have walked through the hallways at Disney and DreamWorks Animation, and one whose work I've long admired is Chris Sanders. Whether you've realized it or not, he has contributed some of the most beloved films of the past 30 years, and played a key role in making them special. He has also transitioned into a successful career as a director, bringing his unique storytelling sensibilities and humor to those movies. With the release of his new film, The Call of the Wild, I wanted to go over his career, and why he deserves more appreciation from cinephiles and animation fans. Sanders' first animation gig was at Marvel Productions, where he served as a model designer for Muppet Babies. Around that time, he also began devising a children's book about an alien named Stitch. That book was never sold, so he put the character away for a while. Sanders later had a brief stint at Film Roman. There he worked as an animation stylist for one of the segments in the television special Garfield: His 9 Lives. Eventually he landed a job at Disney Animation, working in both visual development and the story department. His first film there was The Rescuers Down Under, where he helped with designing the characters and storyboarding. Next he worked alongside Brenda Chapman and the other story artists on Beauty and the Beast, with one of his biggest contributions being the final transformation scene. Looking at his storyboards for that sequence, his style is unmistakable. Ditto the designs he drew for Belle and the Beast. Sanders also storyboarded on the sequence where Belle is attacked by wolves. His experience with mounting that scene has even come back around with The Call of the Wild. When you see that movie, you'll know what I mean. After his work on Aladdin, Sanders was given more responsibilities on The Lion King. In addition to being the film's production designer, he was assigned to storyboard a number of key sequences. One was the energetic and colorful Can You Feel the Love Tonight musical number. Another is the scene where Mufasa returns to Simba as a ghost, one of the emotional high points of the movie. That pivotal moment would have probably played out a little differently without Sanders' influence. He also worked on the climax when Simba confronts Scar, and he even had a hand in Scar's design. Looking at his storyboards and character designs over his career, you can sense a strong animal motif, which is probably why The Lion King proved such a good fit for his talents. Around this time, he also did storyboards for the Mickey Mouse cartoon Runaway Brain, came up with the initial concept for the Pines of Rome segment in Fantasia 2000, and helped out with a little movie called Toy Story. When the upstart computer animation studio Pixar was trying to get their first feature off the ground, some of the artists at Walt Disney Animation came over to offer notes and suggestions. One idea that was mentioned in a meeting was that Woody and Buzz would end up in a crane machine filled with aliens. Sanders then sketched a design for Serum Three-Eyed Alien, and one of the most lovable characters in the Toy Story series was born. Chris Sanders was then appointed as the story supervisor for Mulan, for which he also co-wrote the screenplay. It was during the making of that film that Sanders was asked about any potential movie ideas he had. That's when he remembered Stitch, and presented his pitch to the Disney executives. The initial idea was to have Stitch land in a forest full of woodland animals, before the decision was made to have him interact with humans, and the setting was changed to Hawaii. The troublemaking alien was then paired up with a little girl, and thus Lilo and Stitch began to evolve into its final form. Sanders was especially surprised when he was informed by the executives that they wanted the film to retain the look of his drawings. So Lilo and Stitch has Sanders' stamp all over not only the story, but also the visuals and character designs. Teaming up with Dean DeBlois to direct and co-write the film, they created a beautiful and funny movie that successfully mixed the realism of a broken family with a wacky alien comedy. The struggles Lilo and Nani face as they try to cope with losing their parents and living on their own feel genuine, as Sanders and DeBlois chose not to shy away from their reality. It's through seeing their difficulties that Stitch changes and understands what it means to be part of a family. Lilo and Stitch is a unique film in Disney's animated catalog in other ways too. Sanders' drawing style is one that celebrates all sorts of body types, so Lilo and Nani are not shaped like other Disney heroines, and that's really refreshing. He also is not afraid of making Lilo into a girl with peculiar interests, but her quirks fit the character rather than being annoying. Having her be a fan of Elvis Presley is a particularly good touch. There's also respect for the Hawaiian culture, as the setting is used with respect to the island's people and history. There's a particularly lovely scene where Nani sings the Hawaiian song Aloha Oi. The humor also works incredibly well, and the decision to have the backgrounds drawn in watercolor was wonderfully inspired. Sanders also provided the voice for Stitch, giving him his iconic sound, and even continued to voice the alien in the television show and direct-to-video sequels that followed. Lilo and Stitch is one of my favorite Disney animated movies, and I could talk about its themes and ideas for a long time. Following the success of Lilo and Stitch, Sanders pitched another idea to Disney Animation. Titled American Dog, the film centered on a thespian dog who finds himself stranded in the Nevada desert and attempts to go back home with help from an eye patch-wearing cat and a radioactive rabbit. Just based on the available concept art, the film would have continued to have Sanders' trademark humor and had a lot of promise. As this was to be his first computer-animated film, he wanted to experiment with the technology and present the movie with a more hand-drawn aesthetic. What little test footage exists in the movie certainly makes it look quite stunning. When John Lasseter was made the head of Disney Animation, he was not that impressed with what was presented to him. Due to their creative disagreements, Sanders left the film, and it instead transformed into Bolt. I actually really like Bolt, but I will always wonder how American Dog would have turned out. Something notable did happen when Sanders left Disney, though. Usually when a character is created for a Disney animated film, Disney owns the rights, even if it's never used and becomes locked away in the archives. However, Sanders wanted to keep using the aforementioned eye-patch-wearing cat for a potential comic book, and miraculously, Disney set up the paperwork and allowed him to keep the character. That almost never happens, which should tell you how respected Chris Sanders was at Disney. That cat, eventually given the name Ogo, became the star of Sanders' webcomic Kiskaloo, in which he interacted with two girls, a rabbit, and other characters. These misadventures are yet another example of Chris Sanders' creativity and delightfully offbeat humor, and make for a great companion piece to Lilo and Stitch. After departing Disney, he was hired by DreamWorks Animation, initially to work on a movie about cavemen, and then given the last-minute assignment of retooling an adaptation of Cressida Cowell's How to Train Your Dragon books. Collaborating again with Dean DeBlois on the film, they heightened the drama and redesigned the main characters to be somewhat older. A particularly important element in the film's success are the scenes between Hiccup and Toothless. Their interactions feel believable, and Sanders and DeBlois craft some beautiful scenes without dialogue, allowing the visuals to build that friendship. The animators brought a cat-like grace to the way Toothless moved, and the other dragons showed a lot of imagination too. The flying scenes are also remarkable, and much like Lilo and Stitch showed the difficult relationships that can happen between sisters, How to Train Your Dragon showed the strain that might happen between parents and their offspring. The film is able to put you in the middle of this Viking community and their conflict with dragons, and it made for a truly stirring adventure. After completing How to Train Your Dragon, Chris Sanders went back to directing that caveman movie I mentioned. Based on an idea conceived by John Cleese and co-directed with Kirk D'Amico, The Cruise was a hilarious look at a cave family encountering a changing world. Sanders' strength at developing a family dynamic continued here with The Cruise. There's also a strong theme running throughout the film of the notion of staying with what you're familiar with and how there's nothing wrong with evolving and trying new things. The Croods are a well-developed clan, and it's especially nice seeing how the father Grug and the daughter Eep deal with the changes and challenges facing them as the world is seemingly coming to an end. While not the main focus like Sanders' previous movies, we still see the bond between human and pet, as Grug continually confronts a prehistoric tiger-like beast, and the son Thunk befriends a little crocodile who acts a lot like a dog. The stakes are definitely there in the story, and it's not afraid of incorporating some dark subject matter, especially the more carnivorous animals, and when the intrepid explorer Guy's backstory is revealed. Sanders also put his visual stamp on the movie, especially with the designs for Eep and the many colorful animals the Croods meet on their journey. The Croods is a beautifully animated and clever comedy, and one I'm always happy to revisit. And now we reach the release of his newest directorial effort, The Call of the Wild. Based on the classic novel by Jack London, the story of a dog named Buck who finds himself in the Yukon in the midst of the gold rush has many themes common in Sanders' work. It's a book perfectly suited to his sensibilities, and I think he did a beautiful job of adapting the story, alongside screenwriter Michael Green. The film is not afraid of showing the dangers Buck encounters, as well as the fights that ensue with other canines. There's also the relationship he forms with John Thornton, an outdoorsman played by Harrison Ford. It's a touching friendship that blossoms between the two, and they have excellent chemistry. Watching the movie, you can see Sanders putting a lot of his animation expertise into it, especially with the way the dogs are presented. The decision was made to use computer-animated dogs rather than real ones, due to the risk involved in using dogs in a story involving brutality and dogfighting. This also gave Sanders the freedom to capture the thought processes of Buck and the dogs and wolves he meets. There are changes made to the source material, but those enhance the story rather than detract. I was very excited to see Call of the Wild, and I was not disappointed. However, a lot of people weren't, and I did not understand this. There was so much sneering and cynicism at the trailer, which I find disrespectful to Sanders. As you can see, he's been involved in so many beloved movies, and yet people still doubted him. It reminded me a lot of how Rich Moore was treated prior to the release of Ralph Breaks the Internet, and how people talked about Steven Spielberg before Ready Player One opened. How many times do these talented filmmakers have to prove themselves before you stop being cynical about their next movie? In any case, now that The Call of the Wild has opened, I hope you give the movie a shot, especially after all the wonderful contributions to cinema that Chris Sanders has made over the years. I, for one, will look forward to every project with his name on it. He is creative and funny, an incredible artist, and one of the best storytellers working in movies today. Thank you so much, Chris Sanders, for all the entertainment you have created for us. See you next time.